In this video, I shall show you how to obtain the true airspeed when we're given a rectified or calibrated airspeed when the resulting true airspeed exceeds 300 knots. Now, we've seen earlier that when we obtain a true airspeed below 300 knots, we will just take that figure as the true airspeed. But when the resulting true airspeed exceeds 300 knots, we need to apply a compressibility correction. So let's work an example now. Let's assume we have an aircraft that's flying at 20,000 feet and that the corrected outside air temperature is negative 30 degrees Celsius. And we're given a rectified airspeed of 298 knots. Let's set up the CRP-5 so that we can solve this problem. Again, the true airspeed will be read on the outer scale. However, we'll enter the CRP-5 with the rectified or calibrated airspeed on the inner scale. But before we do that, we have to set up our pressure altitude as well as the corrected outside air temperature. Our altitude is 20,000 feet, which we don't see in this window, so we have to move the window to the right where the numbers get bigger. And there you go, we have 20,000 feet there with an outside air temperature of negative 30. So let's line up negative 30 with 20,000 feet. So we now have 20,000 feet and negative 30 degrees Celsius. Let's bring that to the top of the screen. 20,000 feet and negative 30 degrees Celsius. And given our rectified airspeed is 298 knots, so let's look for 298. So we'll have to rotate our CRP-5 until we get 298. And 298 would be 400 knots. And we just put the cursor on 298 and 400 knots. So there you go, that's 298 and 400 knots. Now, because the resulting true airspeed, and again you can see the rectified or calibrated airspeed, we read that off on the inner scale, and the true airspeed we read on the outer scale. So rectified airspeed, true airspeed. However, since the true airspeed exceeds 300 knots, we need to apply a compressibility correction. Fortunately, we have a formula which you don't really need to calculate. That formula is the formula to apply the compressibility correction is true airspeed over 100 minus 3, and our resulting true airspeed was 400 knots. So 400 over 100 gives me 4, minus 3 gives me 1, which means I need to move one division in the direction of the arrow, which means that way. So right now I have this little arrow pointed at this number here that says 5. I don't really care about the numbers. I care that I'm going to shift the scale to the left by one indication. So that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to move this big arrow one division to the left. And there you go. So initially I was pointed at 5, now it's pointed one division to the left, and I'm going to look for my 298 knots and see where that has moved to. And 298 knots has now moved here. So what speed would that be? Well, that's 350, 360, 370, 380, 390, 395. So 395 knots is my true airspeed. My true airspeed has dropped by 5 knots. 5 knots is the compressibility correction. And that's all there is to it.